So when all is said and done, I think the Witching Hour is officially over. The crossover mini-series event, whatever you want to call it, creating a giant upheaval in the magic world of the DC superheroes. When all's said and done, I think I liked it. There were times where I would start reading and it was so thick with text that I would sort of put the comic aside and read something else. I think it's not just thick with text, but often these captions which didn't seem to be moving the story along, kind of a narrator hovering over the comic and not plunging me deep in the comic. Although, as I read more and more, I thought, wait a minute, is James Tynion trying to bring back that old-fashioned 70s kind of caption where the writer's kind of showing off his writing chops and evolving the story without the art, so to speak? And somehow over time I began to enjoy all these captions more. They're all told in the past tense, and I don't know if I think that's uncommon for captions. And even though, the past tense is a very familiar thing when you're reading novels, somehow past tense in comics gives it a very strange feeling, like everything's fated to happen. Which kind of goes well with this idea of the magical universe, or the magical side of DC. So there's really a big chunky story here that both feels stretched out and compressed in this weird way because it's so dense. But it feels like the basics of it could have been told in 2 issues. And I guess there's a total of 5. So there was a Witching Hour. There was a Witching Hour Wonder Woman Justice League Dark #1, and I think it ends with Witching Hour Justice League Dark. So the first one was Wonder Woman Justice League Dark, and the last one is Justice League Dark Wonder Woman, but they're both #1. And then they cross over into different, into Justice League and into Wonder Woman. So there's two issues of it in Wonder Woman. I think only 1 issue of it in Justice League Dark, although it was set up by the events that happened in Justice League Dark #3, which is still my favorite issue of Justice League Dark so far. So yeah, this is a long, dense read. It's kind of like when it comes out in trade, just sit down on a rainy day where you have nothing else to do and just dive into the Witching Hour. I kind of hope the trade will include the first 3 issues of Justice League Dark. That would make a lot of sense, but who knows? Because also nonsensical, these all say, Witching Hour Part 3, Witching Hour Part 4, and then we got Witching Hour #1. No mention of it being Part 5, unless it's Part 6. So I think they made a number of mistakes. Like, I think at the end of Wonder Woman, Part 4 of Witching Hour, it says, to be concluded next week in Justice League Dark and Wonder Woman, The Witching Hour. But I don't think another Justice League Dark has come out yet, so it's concluded in The Witching Hour. They call it Wonder Woman, The Witching Hour. Here it's called Justice League Dark, Wonder Woman, The Witching Hour. So I don't know if I've somehow missed an issue. It didn't feel like I have. But they've certainly made it hard on readers who aren't following on their website exactly what you're supposed to read next. But overall, it's just cool. So I'll be interested to see how this kind of reshaped magic world, like the green and the red are not quite the same. Some other things aren't the same. Hecate now, I think, is more of a major player. I will remain so, and Circe in the magic world. We'll have to see. I hope so. I liked all the upside down kind of imagery and everything. That was really cool. So a lot of stuff is tied together really in really cool ways. Now at the very end, they say, hey, the story's not really over. to be continued in Justice League Dark. So I think is that leading into? I think it's leading into a whole new set of adventures, a whole new arc. But maybe it's continuing Justice League Dark as one final issue that will close it out. So we'll see, I guess, when Justice League Dark comes out. So if that kind of more dense, old-fashioned comic, it reminds me of reading Steve Gerber or J.M. DeMatteis on the Defenders back when they were very involved in surreal, magical world, although with less of the preachiness that those kinds of authors might have brought into it. Yeah, so interesting little journey. Just took me a while to get used to. So, Murder Falcon. I thought I was going to like this a lot more. It was a mildly pleasant read, but I just thought there would be something more to it. It's hard to totally embrace the cheesy joke, which they repeat over and over again about rock and metal. Maybe because I don't buy this guy looking like he's... Like, the artist doesn't put anything into the playing that make his playing look amazing. Just a lot of lightning, which powers this creature, Murder Falcon, who fights monsters. So, I mean, the whole plot is somehow there's monsters in our world, and somehow there's this creature named Murder Falcon who's powered by really good shredding metal guitar work. But I don't feel like... Despite the fact that this is a so the artist and the writer are the same person, and he's, presumably then he's really into metal and everything, I just don't feel like, I just didn't feel the connection. I mean, there's some great art like this, that's, kind of, that scene is kind of almost shades of Will Eisner there, but it just, it just didn't go beyond anything but being kind of a pleasant read. I might pick up the next issue if I just happen to feel like it and see it. But there's no huge rush to jump on Murder Falcon, unfortunately. I'm also really digging Batman Kings of Fear more with issue 3 now. Been loving the art. The art in issue 2 was amazing. Maybe a little bit more of a peak moment than the art in this issue, although totally love the art in this issue too, actually. And again, the writing seems to be behind the art in the sense of just providing just enough for the artist to go crazy, but not really convincing me of the story. And I'm not totally convinced in this issue of the whole idea that the Scarecrow, or the way the Scarecrow has blackmailed Batman to let him tag along with Batman. But it was done really fun. It kind of won me over in the way they portrayed the Scarecrow as kind of a little bit, a lot of comedicness in the way the Scarecrow trying to keep up with Batman and like his commentary on the crazy things Batman does and the way Batman behaves. So, yeah, not a whole lot more to say about it. The Terrifics was a pretty cool issue again. So it makes 3 Terrifics issues in a row that I really enjoyed. Given that it's Dark Knight metal connected somehow, the metal cover makes more sense. Maybe Murder Falcon needed a metal cover, but actually, these metallic chromium covers seem to be hit or miss, and this one is really hard to read visually, although it's still kind of striking in its metal lookingness. One irony is I didn't totally realize this wasn't Dale Eaglesham as I was reading it. The artist that's taken Eagleham's place did a good job of, not exactly, but coming into giving it the same kind of energy and vibe that Eaglesham had been giving it the last 2 issues. So yeah, this comic, which is now number 9, has never had an artist on it for more than 2 issues in a row, even though this is, an artist-led comic. But I wonder if I'll still like this once the Tom Strong family leaves the story. But it's really clicked during this. Maybe they could just, I'd be totally happy if they just include Tom Strong as a permanent member. I love the contrast, the similarities and the differences between Tom Strong and Mr. Terrific. One is all about both are, super geniuses, and their superpower is really their mind, although Tom Strong's a little extra strong. But there's no... But Mr. Terrific has no family connections, although perhaps with the Terrifics he'll gain. I think last issue of X-O Manowar was a little bit shaky for me compared to other issues that I really liked. But stuff from that issue is now paid off more in this issue. And we learn more about this character and the world of robots he comes from. And I know with all of this connects to that Divinity and Eternity series of books that Kent did for Valiant. But I'm a little unclear on all the connections. I'm trying to remember if this guy and his whole issue with his robot world, he's almost like a East Indian version of Magnus Robot Fighter in some weird way. And there's an intriguing aspect where, I guess because of his ability to fight robots, he also can overcome the Man of War suit, cybernetic kind of suit. So it's fun, and I sort of vaguely remember this character who wanted to form a religion based around the Divinity character, and now we're seeing a world where he's kind of in control, apparently. So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen next with Matt Kint's X-O Manowar, which I've stuck with it for a long time now. We're on issue 20. I've been on for all 20 issues. I don't always stick with Valiant books that long. And the art was really good this issue. I think last issue with Juan Jose Ripe, there were some problems. Maybe it was more with the colorist, but I didn't see those problems this time. And it made it easier for me to get into the art too. So I'll be sticking with this book for a while longer. Green Lantern and Huckleberry Hound was kind of a funny case. It's written by Mark Russell. In one way or another, I've enjoyed just about all the Mark Russell I've read. I think this is one of his less successful comics at social commentary. It involves Green Lantern and a different version of Huckleberry Hound than was in the previous Mark Russell book in Snagglepuss. Yeah, Snagglepuss. And so this Huckleberry Hound is a failed comedian who, I guess, crossed the line politically with Richard Nixon and is sort of out of favor, which is a little hard to believe. I mean, lots of comedians crossed Richard Nixon and the American establishment during the 60s and were very successful. But, and it takes place during African-American riots in Detroit. And I don't know very much about that, but it all felt kind of forced. And it felt to me a bit like Huckleberry Hound is a fantasy for the white guy. You know, if I were there back in the riots in Detroit, you know, I would be the one white guy that was cool with the black guys. Of course, Huckleberry is a dog, but he's portrayed in a sense as a white man, I think. You know, I'm not totally sure. He lived in the South with the Klan driving by and waving hi to him, so I assume that he's not considered a minority that the Klan is after. It had really cool art by Rick Leonardi. I hope we see a lot more of Rick Leonardi. He was always one of my favorite artists in the 90s. I don't know why he's not used more, because he obviously does a great job. It's interesting, some of the inks here are by Dan Green, who is an inker who goes way back, I think, to the 70s. And I haven't seen his name that much in recent years. So this was worth reading, but it just wasn't, it didn't totally click, and it seemed a little forced in its trying to make a social message, especially with that fantasy of, you know, I would be the one cool white guy. I just noticed something more about this Green Lantern Huckleberry Hound thing. On the cover, most of the protesters are white, as if the riots in Detroit involved mostly white people. So I guess it's the case of a cover artist who maybe doesn't understand what actually was going on inside the comic. I was expecting to like Lodger a lot more than I actually did like it. It was okay. I might get the next issue out of curiosity. I'm not sure. Might depend on, you know, how easy it is to find and how heavy my load of comics is. But I've read a few issues of Stray Bullets and enjoyed them, and always meant to go back and sort of read the whole thing, and I thought, well, maybe I should start it from the beginning, even though people say you can jump in anywhere. So I thought, great, with Lodger I can start at the beginning. And maybe stuff they've done here will play out better in the long run. But laid over a lot of what we see is the blog of someone named The Lodger, and it really... I really did not enjoy reading the Lodger's blog, and it confused me until deep into the story till I realized we were reading the Lodger's blog and we weren't reading the blog of anyone we were seeing. I thought it was her blog for a long time. Yeah, so I felt detached, confused. I wasn't in love with the artwork, and yeah, I just didn't care very much. So we'll see where the Lodger goes next. But the narrative technique being used here, in this case, just does not work for me. Man, reading Doom Patrol at this point is weird, especially since it's set up here as kind of a episode of Dungeons and Dragons. I guess, I mean, that's kind of fun, kind of clever, but this issue is eight months late, I guess, 7 or 8 months late. It should have come out before the Milk Wars began. It literally, at the end of the issue, says to be continued in Milk Wars #1 or something along those lines. I can't find where that's set, where it says that. But they play up this whole Dungeons and Dragons kind of aspect of things, but not to any great effect. It's fun, but I don't feel like it tells us anything or really goes anywhere. So the art and especially the color is very good. So, I'm not unhappy to have read it. I wish they would admit if this is the last issue of Doom Patrol, that this is the last issue of Doom Patrol, or let us know if Doom Patrol is continuing or not. I feel like I heard on someone's podcast something about some new Doom Patrol coming out, so maybe it is continuing in some format. I don't know if that'll be continuing off of what happened in these issues. Total of what? How many? We got 12 issues of Doom Patrol during, I don't know, what, maybe a 2-year period, or maybe a 2.5 year period. I'm not sure. So anyway, I guess it's a fun issue to read, and the sad thing is it's kind of a fizzle just because of the context of it being so late and of it coming behind something that's already completely finished, and that it apparently is the last issue. I really enjoyed this issue of the Creeps magazine. I read it just maybe on Halloween itself. It's not nearly as sensual and mature as the cover by San Julian might make you think. It's kind of goofy, old-fashioned horror stories, but yeah, a bit on the goofier side. Like a vampire with dental problems caused by biting someone with a cross tattooed on their neck. Kind of retelling, a modern retelling of sorts of the portrait of Dorian Gray, but with no particularly mature twists or anything. This story, The Invisible Horror, didn't really make much sense. There was kind of a quick jab at a devil meets a card shark in the Wild West story. The stories are mostly quick in and out. Dracula Returns wasn't really about the return of Dracula. It was about someone who helps Dracula get rid of his many brides that are getting in his way. One of my favorites, it was kind of an homage to Wally Wood, was Silence Please, a story by Nick Cuddy, from a writer from you might recognize from the old days. But this was a fun little science fiction horror story. Nothing super special about the twist at the end. A nice grimness to it, though. I think that one would have fit most into the old real Warren, creepy and eerie magazines. Although this one, art-wise, was the closest to it. Diagnosis of Death. I've got to see this artist again, Santos Zabulos. This is an Ambrose Bierce story that they adapt. It's a very minor one, I guess. I've never heard of it, and it doesn't have a lot going on, but the artist gives it so much atmosphere that it was fun to read. So yeah, if you can find Creeps and you like the old-fashioned kind of short story, slightly silly twist stories, the Creeps is good. What if Thor was raised by frost giants was... I didn't know what to expect picking it up. I'd never heard of any of these creators. Sachs, Ethan Sachs, the writer, Michael Bandini, the artist. The colorist, Matt Milla, I may have seen him before. But anyway, I like the idea of the what if, and I like the idea of one-shots. So what if Thor was raised by the frost giants? And it was pretty fun, and it really kind of focused on Loki. And it was parallel and not parallel to the way the Loki stories of the Thor and Loki stories of in the version where Asgard wins. The art was workable enough. So anyway, I enjoyed this story. I kind of wished it went a little deeper into the Thor Loki thing. I mean, who is Thor here, really? And what effect does he have on the ice giants? What effect do the ice giants have on him, I guess I should ask also. But it sort of ends a little open-ended. I think somewhere else I heard someone point out this could continue. We have so many alternate versions in the non-what-if version, so many alternate Thors. I can imagine this ice giant Thor showing up sometime. I would have loved more of an explanation of sizes and stuff. Why is Loki human size? And did Thor become a little more giant size? I guess he's not very giant size. I guess that's the kind of questions you can't really ask, because they've established all along that Loki is the size of a human. So anyway, interesting. I guess the thing about it is, what if Thor was raised by frost giants isn't like some question from Marvel continuity that we've always wondered the answer to, like what if Gwen Stacy had lived or whatever. It's not something I'm guessing that many people have thought about, but it ended up making for an entertaining comic anyway. So I got to keep an eye on these new what ifs. I also liked the what if about Flash Thompson becoming Spider-Man, but I'm kind of holding off because Matt and I might do a podcast centered around that issue, and perhaps some other what if issues. So yeah. Ice Cream Man rocked. It was crazy, cool, fun, horror, teetering beyond the edge of chaos, basically. So in every issue, there's parts that we understand and parts that aren't fully comprehensible. And normally that would really piss me off in most comics, but somehow this comic makes it work. So even though I'm not understanding everything, I'm really enjoying the ride, and I really want to read the next issue. And I've got the pattern now, so I'm not expecting the next issue to follow in any direct way off of this issue. I'm still hoping for little clues that'll tell us more. And this issue, amongst other things, it seems like just chaos and awful things are happening all over this neighborhood, and there's these ambulance drivers just driving past all these catastrophes as they obsess over the drugs they've stolen from the hospital and trying them out and stuff. And it's just such a wacky framework and such a crazy world. And I don't normally like really art with these really thin lines, but Morazzo is such a good storyteller as a visual artist. I think that's how you say his name, Martin Morazzo. and so I don't know, invested. He really feels invested in the horror and the goofiness and the craziness of this story, that I'm really coming to love him as an artist. And there's pretty good colors here, so that helps. So yeah, I can't wait for the next issue of Ice Cream Man. I'd say my only Ice Cream Man complaint is sometimes the fonts. I don't think this text font really aided in the narration. I think they should have. I don't know. The letterer or the font chooser is kind of letting us down a bit in Ice Cream Man. Who is that? Lettering by Good Old Neon. That sounds conveniently like no one knows who you are if they don't like your lettering. Okay, so anyway, Ice Cream Man, hot stuff.